Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to yet another episode of Uganda Diaspora Show. My name is Lynn, Komugisha, and we come to you from Civic Space TV that is online. If you go to YouTube, you'll find us there, Civic Space TV. On Twitter, we're at Civic Space TV, as well as Facebook and other social media platforms of your choice. So I welcome you once again to a very interesting period, if I must say. The other day, we woke up to news of a marriage, or should I say an agreement, as it is officially, said. So the DP, and that is under the President General of the DP, that is Norbert Mao, and President Yoweri Museveni the other day signed an agreement of a cooperation between the parties of the NRM and DP, which of course has riled the opposition and raised debate across the nation. But before we get into that conversation and how that affects the future, the politics, the Ugandan politics in future, or the future of politics in Uganda, allow me welcome Dr. Milton Allimadi to the show. Thank you, sir, once again. It is a pleasure hosting you once again on Civic Space TV. Now, Dr. Milton is a Ugandan American author and also a professor and holds many other hats. A very warm welcome to the show.
Good morning. I hope you can all hear me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And it's not Dr. Allimadi, by the way. It's just Milton Allimadi.
Oh, right, Milton, it is. Thank you.
Thank you for this important show. You always touch on the most topical issues, and I'm always happy to be a part of it.
Glad to have you. Right. We have also Ambassador Henry Mayega. Ambassador, you're welcome once again. You're not new to the show. We've had you a couple of times, but it is always interesting to have you on the show. Miriam, a very good afternoon, or is it morning that side?
Morning, Lynn. Greetings to all the panelists. I'm happy to be here once again.
All right, all right. Okay, fantastic. Now let's get into it. When we woke up to news of an agreement, I remember it was an afternoon and I was in office and photos were flowing, coming in from left, right, and center. And we saw that there had been an agreement signed between the DP and, of course, the NRM. It was interesting to see, but I want to pick your views before we can get deep into this conversation. Was this something of a shock to anybody? And I take it upon anybody can react to this. Was it a shock? Was it a surprise? Should have Ugandans reacted the way they did? All right, Milton, take it away.
No, the answer is absolutely no, not zero.
Why do you say that?
If you do any research, you will see that for the last 5 years, people have been talking about the leader of the Democratic Party not actually being involved in opposition. This is not news to anybody. So that's why it's surprising that the same Ugandans who have been saying that this is not a leader of opposition, this is a leader who is very close to the regime and suspected of working very closely with the regime. The literature is all there for anybody to do the research. So on the one hand, Ugandans have been saying that, and he's been defending himself vehemently, saying this is not true, right? So then when it turns out to be true, why are you surprised? So my only thing is I am surprised by the reaction of the same Ugandans who've been accusing him. In fact, he could argue that you are the ones who drove me to the regime. You've been accusing me all these years of working for the regime, of undermining the Democratic Party. And now when I make it official, you then say I am betraying you. You are the ones who betrayed me. You had no faith in my leadership. That's the argument that he could make, and I would support his position if he made that argument. Now, here's the problem. he could have only made that deal in his individual capacity. Otherwise, it is illegal, null, and void, because the constitution of his own party, which he knows, of course, requires that the NEC, the National Executive Committee of his party, be involved and sign off on that deal. And he's pretty much admitted it. One of the latest stories in the Monitor says that he met with, I forget the formal name of this other committee, which normally advises the NEC, but cannot make a decision on behalf of NEC. So this is a individual personal deal between the leader of that party and the regime.
All right. Thank you, Milton, for that. Interesting. I would agree, but I would want us to come back to the legality of his move. Miriam, if I could pick your mind, were you surprised by this development? And if so, why?
Like Milton said, most of us were not surprised, because if you see the activities that were being done by opposition groups and civil society, which were like political, the DP faction led by Norbert Mao wasn't involved as opposition. So he was already isolating himself, and maybe he knew that. Maybe he was just shy to declare officially that he's out. But unfortunately, like Milton said, he didn't go as a party, though he claims he took the party with him. So that's where lies the contention. In multi-party politics, coalitions always happen, alliances happen, and any party can ally with a ruling party or opposition party group, but they are done in a democratic way, and you involve everybody. It's not like the president kind of hijacks the whole institution and goes with it, which is the same thing that happened with UPC. So we've seen this happening over time, and it's unfortunate that we are not changing. It's unfortunate that Norbert Mao, who was claiming to be a person who follows the laws, and to the later, is also committing the same mistake over and over and dragging our democracy down the ground once again.
Right. Thank you, Miriam. Ambassador Henry Mayega, if you can respond to this. Allimadi and Miriam are saying they were not surprised, but Ugandans clearly were surprised in a way, since they didn't hope that would come the way it came. But also, what led to this cooperation? I mean, with all this happening, you as Henry Mayega, ambassador, were you surprised? And could you perhaps give us a history of how you, as NRM, arrived at this?
I don't see really even why we should be talking about a surprise, because in my view, it is Mao's inalienable right to negotiate with any political entity in the country with whom he or as a group of DP think they can work with. And in this particular connection, yes, Mao decided to work with the governing party, and that is the NRM, which is led by President Yoweri Museveni. And so it was in his right. And if he chose a particular section of the DP, irrespective of the quarrels that they have amongst DP supporters or executive members and so on and so forth, to work with Museveni, that is really a choice, a path, which was taken by Mao and his colleagues. And therefore, for me, I can't even say correctly. I can't even say that I'm surprised, or I'm not surprised, because that is a choice that he chose to take. But I just want to dig a little bit into the history of the DP, especially when it came to the election of the leader of DP sometime back in Mbale, where the delegates conference that chose Norbert Mao as the leader of DP and the subsequent one that happened in Gulu, because it so appears that there was a section, especially the one from Uganda, which others have chosen to call Central Uganda, that rejected him. And I remember at that point in time, they formed a political grouping that was referred to as Subi, which metamorphosed into the NUP, which is currently taking part in the politics of the country. So you see a level of rejection by a particular section. And in that section, doesn't come as a surprise to me that it is the one that is actually talking about, talking so much against what Mao, the political path he has chosen. Rather, in my view, these are things Mao may have chosen, for instance, to negotiate with the President Yoweri Museveni of the country, to join him as an entity, which hasn't happened for the first time, because the DPs, you remember in 1986, quite a number of them, including Paul Semogere, including Sebana Kizito, and quite a number of others, chose to work with President Yoweri Museveni, and they formed in 1986, which was what was called or referred to as the broad-based government. And therefore, for me, as far as I'm concerned, Mao has chosen a path. Whether people say they are surprised and others probably say that they are not surprised, for me, that is not even the matter. The matter is, Norbert Mao has chosen to work with the current government, and he has seen a direction which probably is going to promote him politically. And so be it, because working together with government definitely is not the first time it's happening in our country. It happened in 1962. It happened in 1980. Right across the border in Kenya, it happens almost every other time there is a round of elections. There was a time when, for instance, Uhuru Kenyatta couldn't work with Raila Odinga. They are now agreed that they're going to work together, and I believe that probably they're going to win these elections, which are around the corner. These are things which have been happening, for instance, also in the UK, because I remember at one point in time, David Cameron worked with the Liberals in the same government. And these things are also happening in Germany, parties coming together, either in one of the states of Germany to form a local government. In France, these things have happened. So for me, it's not a question of surprise. He may have negotiated this kind of arrangement with President Yoweri Museveni and his NRM to work together quietly, but of course, that is how politics works. And if there are any people in the country who are surprised about these kinds of things, because you see, when you negotiate with another political entity, you don't go to State Square in Kampala to make those kinds of negotiations. You definitely have to go into the quiet and negotiate, and then come out with an agreement. And of course, even the UPC itself negotiated with Yoweri Museveni. So for me, I can't say that I'm surprised. I also can't say that I'm actually not surprised. So for me, because that is not the issue. The issue is Mao and his part of the DP have chosen to work with the NRM. So in the meantime, I'll leave the argument at that.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for actually ushering us into that. Now, Miriam, Allimadi,
yes,
we are seeing that this is not the first time, as the ambassador said. We have seen alliances come and go. We have seen, political allies come together and, fall apart. And it has been all over the country. One thing here is that when things were one-party politics, then we got into a multi-party dispensation. And after this agreement was signed, some politicians were saying that this actually has an impact on, is a danger to multi-party political dispensation. Do you think this is true?
no,
Go right on.
it is not true, because even the examples that the ambassador gave, he gave examples of opposition that was broad-based and had popular support coming together into some sort of alliance. So the example of DP under Semogere, right, or DP of the 1960s and the UPC, those were different DPs compared to the DP of today. How many seats does the DP have in the parliament today? what percentage did the leader of the party get in the last presidential election. So this is largely fiction. And in his explanation, the ambassador said a very key word, because as a journalist, we are trained to listen carefully. He said this, whatever you want to call it, because it's not really an alliance. One individual cannot form an alliance. But this partnership between this individual and the regime, and I quote, will promote him politically. Not promote the party politically, promote him politically. Him refers to an individual. So this is a good deal for this individual. He gets a high-profile ministerial portfolio, even though I have my doubts, because as we all know, while in Uganda, there may be many ministers, there's only one essential minister, and that is the dictator himself. He makes all the critical decisions in the country. So that is my view. It is not going to impact or diminish the level of opposition to this regime. It's going to mobilize Ugandans even more, because now we know the people who are in true opposition as we approach the next stage of the political process, which of course is the next election in a couple of years. So no, I don't think it will have any impact in discouraging opposition. In fact, it will mobilize more opposition. And as I said, the deal cannot be legal without the involvement and signing off and the approval of the NEC. So this is an individual deal. And I'm sure at some point the courts, if they do go that direction, will make it clear as well in Uganda.
All right, thank you, Milton. I see we have been joined by Professor Maurice Ogenga Latigo. Very good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome to the show. We are looking at the future of Uganda politics in of course, in light of the recent happenings when DP, signed an agreement with the NRM, and we are wondering, should this have surprised us? If I could start with, I could get on to you quickly. Should this have really surprised us as Ugandans? And if so, why? And where are we headed with it?
Well, first of all, I must apologize. The rains came this morning in our part of the country, and I went to the field, and I've just come back, and so I don't seem to be very prepared for the program, it is my apology. But I've been listening to parts of the contribution by the ambassador and Mr. Allimadi. The question, does it surprise? Maybe to some extent, yes, because given the utterances that Norbert Mao has made over a long period of time on television, on radios, and even in his campaign as a presidential candidate, that he has reached this position now is a surprise. But that really has happened. It's not a surprise at all, because first of all, this is the tragic nature of Ugandan politics, that instead of us building, we like to destroy so that we gain advantage. And secondly, instead of us recognizing that there will be life after President Museveni, there will be life after NRM, and there will be life after this regime, so that those who can remain open, independent of the actions of the regime can legitimately take part in correcting the mistakes that have been made. But where Uganda has reached in terms of politics, it is not surprising at all.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. It's never too late. Miriam, we understand that the opposition really was not amused with this, especially his party. Most of them want to, in fact, they're considering a court, they're going to court over this following certain illegalities therein. But Mao seems unfazed with this, and so are other, NRM diehards, if I could say. They're saying this was bound to happen, and this is good for the country. Do you think we have reached a point in our politics as Uganda to have strong coalitions that go beyond personalities?
We should. If you look at opposition has been having coalitions, and they would join in, say, electoral processes, campaigning for some things like term limits, age limits. They would have coalitions as parties and do something constitutionally. So yes, we are at that level where we can have coalitions, and the parties actually strengthen those coalitions, end up strengthening the party positions more than when they act out individually. Even currently in Soroti, they were campaigning together. That's some sort of a loose coalition during that election, however temporary it might look. So coalitions, yes, we can have them. But can we have the coalitions with the ruling party? No, actually what the ruling party does is destroy. It looks forward to destroy the existing party organs, especially since they are all opposition. So the aim of NRM is still, I think NRM and its leadership still believes in one party kind of policy where they have to be the lone ranger, even the way they act in elections, the way they act in parliament, the way they act in elections, everywhere. It's like the other people don't exist, the other views don't exist, opposition is evil. Everybody, actually in Museveni speak, every opposition are enemies, not opponents, not alternative governments or party organs as stipulated in the constitution. To him, they are enemies which must be destroyed. And that is a threat to democracy, because democracy seeks for alternative organs, institutions, which keep checking each other and providing opportunities to every Ugandan so that they can participate in leadership, in choosing leaders, in policy making. So what we end up with is like one party, one line of policy thinking, and if you are not, you are enemy who should be crushed, and that's has been the trend, and detrimental to our democracy. It's no surprise that the opposition groups keep struggling and protesting against. It's like a dictatorship, if I may put it. I don't think that's good for multi-party democracy.
Right. I like that you bring that up, because the opposition in Uganda has been accused of being extremely negative to even things that don't require them to be negative. So I think one political analyst did say that the opposition in Uganda has a bad habit of creating negativity even to things they're not supposed to be negative about. Now, if I could come to you, Milton, is there a possibility for an opposition alliance strong enough to really, because right now they seem to be shaking in their boots. They think the NRM party is working extremely hard to weaken the opposition in all spheres. But right now, we also understand it is quite hard for the opposition to unite. Is it a lack of political maturity? And while we look at Mao's move as if perceived as an individual move, can we have an opposition that is politically strong and mature in its approach to the politics of the country?
Well, first of all, what is the test of a opposition that is strong. An opposition that is strong is an opposition that even though it does not control state resources, defeated the regime in the last election. There's none of us seated here, perhaps unless it's the ambassador, who does not believe that the regime was defeated in the last election. The regime just controls the organ that announces the so-called winner of the election. So that to me is the proof of a strong, united opposition. United opposition does not mean there has to be one opposition party, correct? In fact, it is the sign of emerging democracy to have multiple opposition parties. They're united in their objective, which is to end dictatorship in Uganda. And they have demonstrated that in more than one election, as you know. You can go to Dr. Kizza Besigye and he'll give you good argument about how he also won elections that he contested in. And he also faced the same problem, that the state controls the organs that declare who won the election. The state controls the court that endorses that illegitimate victory. And look at this development in the last election. The United States, which supports this regime to the hilt with almost $1 billion every year in US taxpayer subsidies, with military weapons, with training for the army, and with diplomatic cover in the international organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. But even the United States was forced to admit that the regime did not win this election. If you go to the State Department's website, it says the elections were neither free nor fair. It announces sanctions against unnamed regime officials for being involved in the violence before, during, and after the election. And it made an announcement that more sanctions would be contemplated. And we have seen a number of the sanctions coming on. So I don't think there's a problem in terms of the opposition behavior. In fact, the sign of the opposition's maturity is this, that it has not instructed its supporters to come out to the streets, even though it knew that it was robbed of an election victory. That to me is the sign of maturity. The opposite was demonstrated by the regime. After the stolen election, what have we seen? A campaign of terror against unarmed civilians. Everybody, even in foreign countries, now know the meaning of the word drone in Uganda. It does not mean the same as when we say drone in the United States. In Uganda, it means somebody can come and be abducted in the middle of the street or from their home. They're taken. Nobody knows where they are. They're tortured. Sometimes their bodies are found after they've been killed. Even the sponsor of the Ugandan regime, which is the United States, condemned this conduct and in fact sanctioned, remember, General Kandel, because he was supposed to be the one mobilizing this terror campaign. So that is the state of affairs in Uganda. It is not so much disarray in the opposition, it is disarray in the regime and its campaign of violence.
All right, Milton, Ambassador Henry Mayega, we have seen that over the years, the opposition has come forward to always protest NRM and whatever, they're full of negativity, as you always say, people from the NRM. The other day, Dr. Kizza Besigye says that if this presents an opportunity for the opposition to unite. Now, while his opinion recommends the ideal ground for opposition unity, the conduct of present-day opposition politicians demonstrates beyond rational doubt that they cannot unite against the NRM regime. Right now, I was reading an article by Betty Namboze, and she was saying that, well, right now you have opened our eyes because now we have fertile ground to oppose now, to really fight hard. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? And will, in any way, this move by the opposition really make headway?
I was saying that that is a good one, because where is it written as a requirement that the only coalitions that can be made, or should you want to call them alliances, in Uganda have only to be made between parties in the opposition? It's not a requirement anywhere. Anyone can move up, you can crisscross the political canvas in the country to whichever direction you want. The UPC and sections of the DP, sections of the UPC and sections of the DP have allied with the NRM, and that is their choice. You can't remove it away from them. Besigye can go to any other party. The other day I saw Lukwago getting out of the DP and joining the FDC, and this, in my view, crisscrossing the political canvas in the country is as normal as it is in Kenya, in Europe, and anywhere, so to speak. So for me, I don't want this matter to look as if for somebody to cross from one political organization to another is such a criminal matter. Really, for me, we would be going astray as far as these political arguments that we have at the moment are concerned. So people are free to move to any political party, and many people have been crossing, and they will not stop. That one you can be sure of. They're not going to stop. I know so many in the opposition, for instance, who are currently working with the URM7 government, but they are not going to come out in the open to tell you. There are many across the political canvas and in the opposition who are working with President URM7. So it is only those who are faint-hearted politically who are going to imagine that this is a matter that only concerns Mao, and therefore, because Mao has gone to the NRM, the bottom is out of the tub. It is not, and I can assure you many more are going to crisscross. There are those who, for instance, will even leave the NRM and go to other political parties. The Mushega has left, the Richard Kaijuka has left, and quite a number of other people. They've been, so for me, I want to leave. Of course, somebody else is going to say that the political situation in the country is particularly fluid. But for me, that's how I look at politics. It's not, when I belong to a political party, it's not a prison. And nobody should choose where I go politically. And therefore, for us, and those others who have been in the habit of criticizing Norbert Mao for crossing to the NRM, I think I'm making a mistake, because there are more surprises to come as far as I'm concerned. Political coalitions can crisscross the political canvas. And that's what is happening in Kenya, because I don't want to go to Europe. It has happened before in Kenya. It is happening right now. It's going to happen in the future. Even in Uganda, it's going to be the same. And therefore, that's why I disagree with Miriam when she seems to suggest that those who want to make coalitions should actually only do them within the opposition. That is faulty. And she's in for a lot of shock, because that one is not going to happen, because crisscrossing on the political canvas is something that happens. These are things which have also been happening in Uganda. When you look at, for instance, as I mentioned before, the broad-based government in 1986 that was formed by President Yoweri Museveni, many from across the, even probably I should begin from 1980, those who followed the President Yoweri Museveni into the bush, there were quite a cross-section of people from the country. You had monarchists, you had DPs, probably you can save the UPC at that time because it was controlling the government. So probably there were, you could have got probably, I can mention, for instance, Mugisha Muntu, whose father was a known UPC supporter from Muntuyera, and is one of those who went to fetch President Obote from Dar es Salaam to come back to Uganda and then start the political processes that he had from 1980 up to the time when his government was actually overthrown. You find that his son actually chose a totally different political direction, and he went into the bush, and the rest is history, and so on. But again, Herbert, who is a brother of Mugisha Muntu, has been working with the President Yoweri Museveni. So the political situation in the country, as far as I understand it myself, allows and permits anyone to go to any political organization they want, or to form political coalitions as they want. And therefore, people definitely were going to leave the opposition and go and join President Yoweri Museveni in his government, and they're going to be called all sorts of names, which is okay. Name calling in terms of politics is not only a matter that is in Uganda, but just across the globe. I've been watching here on Fox News how Americans are disagreeing on quite a number of things, and there is a lot of name calling and all these kinds of things. And this is the nature of politics. It is competitive. It is about numbers. It is about sometimes agreement. It is about sometimes disagreement. And therefore, people are going to find points of departure here and there. And that is normal as far as I'm concerned. And so Mao, chose to go. We might argue that probably he went with only a section of the DP. But I think the DPs are at fault, including the current members of parliament of the DP, because they outrightly rejected Norbert Mao and is paying them a price. Is paying them a price because of that rejection, because some of these people who have in this politics in this country think that politics is about either religion or region, which in my view is a very big mistake. I would rather aspire for a country that accepts anybody, whether they are of different religion or region or tribe, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Are you therefore saying that this is an individual move by Norbert Mao and not a DP stand?
Well, you have seen what has been happening, that quite a couple of MPs in the parliament have rejected him. And I gave a history of what had been happening in the DP before. You remember the creation of Subi, which in my view has metamorphosed into Noop, if you want. And this kind of rejection probably is part of the reason why Mao has chosen this kind of path. And for me, these disagreements are okay, as long as we can manage them and avoid as much as possible the violence that the country has seen before.
Right. Thank you, Ambassador. Professor Maurice Ogenga Latigo, here's a question for you. From a political commentator, he says Uganda is at a dangerous political crossroads, and goes on to say the principle of dialogue and deliberation among people and parties of different political persuasions is the right thinking, and a very well-meaning Ugandan should. Now, given the problems we face and the broken political system we have, Uganda urgently needs concerted conversations and principled compromise to heal the nation, and blah, blah, blah. Now, we understand that Mao has been the voice of reason in the opposition, the more diplomatic one, the more eloquent and hardly very negative towards a lot of things. Is this the right way for us as a country? Can we gain much from this approach?
Thank you very much. You know, the big problem we have as a country is our failure to admit that there's something wrong with our politics. And until we do that, whatever we do, we are just, it is an exercise in futility. And if you ask what is wrong with our politics, that is where the fundamental question is. You cannot have in the 21st century a country where you have the dominance essentially of one individual, even Jesus Christ, that brought about Christianity.
Professor, this individual, I'm sorry to cut you short, this individual has showed interest that everyone is welcome to have a conversation with him.
Come on.
Because this country, the country Uganda doesn't belong to him. I mean, if you came to my home, I can choose that you come and talk to me or not. But this is our country, all of us. And if you want a rational dialogue amongst Ugandans, create a platform where we define what we want to talk about, the issues that we see, all of us collectively. And once we've agreed on those and we talk, then we'll be correcting our politics. As of now, it is just buying time, and I said this before. President Museveni can try to buy time, but you never buy time. When your time is out, your time is out.
All right, thank you, Professor. Milton, I see you writing in the chat room. The only thing in Uganda that would be surprising would be if FDC or National Unity Platform signed a deal with the dictator. But we have seen people move from these parties and actually join the ruling party, it wouldn't be as overwhelming as it sounds, I think. But away from that, Milton.
I'm referring to the parties, not as individuals.
Oh, right. But we understand, Milton, if you have seen our political scene, it is more of individual. People are minding mostly about the individual interests. It's obvious. The NRM party, we have seen that those accusations have come and gone. But we have also seen in the FDC, the National Unity Platform, all these leaders are being accused of actually chasing their own individual interests. And that is to the detriment of our country as a democracy. We are trying to be democratic. And here are people who are choosing themselves over the country.
If you were a member of any of the parties in opposition in Uganda, the legitimate opposition, you would feel the overwhelming pressure, overbearing pressure by the regime, as Professor Latigo just outlined. We have an individual that is omnipotent in Uganda, absolute power in Uganda. In fact, I think we need to give more credit that there is actually vigorous opposition in Uganda. The temptation, do you know how much they resist on a constant basis? I am sitting here in the United States, far removed from the politics of Uganda. The individuals who come from Uganda who want to meet with me or who have met with me, offering inducements. And I can name names if people insist, So imagine the pressure they must face within Uganda, where the regime controls the absolute purse strings. And beyond that, even if you engage in your own private business enterprise, the regime will interfere to frustrate your private business. Even if you want to be independent and not beholden to the regime, rarely do you have a choice. And you can do a whole show on this and invite Ugandans whose businesses have been disrupted or destroyed by the regime. So if you have that kind of environment where even your livelihood is dependent on the conduct of this one individual, then some of the questions that we're entertaining, I don't think they're really very fair. They live in a situation where absolute power of life and death, as well as livelihood, because if you can't feed your family, that is a life and death situation. You see, these are the choices that they're really having to deal with. And I think it is a credit to them to still have opposition that can come and mobilize people to the polling stations and make it clear, even to the #1 sponsor of the regime, that it was defeated in the polling points. I think they deserve credit for that. So that's the way I would see it. I agree totally with Professor Latigo that we need to really push for a national conversation where we have talented individuals in Uganda, including the professor himself. People can offer a path to the future of a new Uganda. And let us discuss the agenda items which should be in that national dialogue. We can't have the agenda items set by one individual who enjoys and exercises absolute power. And that is the problem that we have. That is the elephant in the room, as Americans like to say, in Uganda. And we need to face that elephant in the room.
Right. Thank you, Milton. I'll come back to you on this working relationship between NRM and DP, if it indeed opens way for other willing opposition parties to have that national dialogue, as you call it. Miriam, we continue to see that most people are rather opposed to this, what call it a marriage of convenience, as they are calling it. But we also see that the president has been the NRM chairperson, has been very open to dialogue and has been very embracing of people who actually show interest in national development. And this is what Mao says, that our cooperation is for national interest and national development, and it's not entirely just my individual move. Have we come to a point of agreement that we can sit at a round table and have a national development conversation, surely, to take us to the next level as a country?
If you want to talk about national development, there are so many avenues for doing that. We have the parliament, for instance. That's the purpose of it, to legislate and make policies for national development, among other things. We have IPOD. We have so many institutions, and if the president wants to talk about national development with the opposition, he can. There was an alternate, an idea created, which he rejected openly with his party, about forming a national dialogue, even though that was particularly for reconciliation and because the country is polarized. What I said earlier, and I want to correct the ambassador, is that Museveni believes opposition are enemies. And Lynn, you also pointed it out. You said that Museveni wants to work with people who want to develop the country. It's as if the opposition is not talking about development.
I'm sorry, Miriam, to cut you short, but I think all the time why he says that is because many times the opposition political parties and individuals are always saying negative things about anything government, like a government program. They're always against
negative things. Which negative things? Violation.
There are whole lots of negative things around. Say, for example, they're trying to develop
kidnapping innocent people, imprisoning people without trials. Which negative things? And
there's development. If I could highlight a recent issue between Kampala capital city, or rather Kampala city Lord Mayor and of course the government spokesperson. They had their own argument, but also we have seen that Lukwago has always been against anything developmental within the city. And it is terrible. It is something the president has always come against, says, most of you are making noise. You don't want us to develop the country in the name of being opposition.
I think that's a blanket accusation, and I don't know any particular thing which is against development that opposition has ever spearheaded. Nothing. If they come out to point out issues, for instance, I can bring out an example in KCCA. There was a time when people were saying that border borders should leave the city, and it was basically the NRM government which stops those ideas for so many times, because they said their party, whatever, the youth and whatever have agencies, and therefore employing the youth, and then they would politically come and stamp on those ideas for a long time. So people, opposition and the ruling party could have alternative views on a particular issue. For instance, if you are talking about land grabbing, NRM will call it land distribution for development. Opposition would say it's land grabbing and you are displacing innocent citizens without due compensation. It would be that you are differing on how the issue is being done, but not on the context. So everybody wants land for development to the government, but how are you going to acquire that land? By dispersing it and giving it to a few individuals in NRM party who come and say they are going to invest and are parading fake investors. I mean, the land grabbing, and then you are not compensating the innocent citizens. So the idea that in a democratic dispensation, the opposition or the other parties are there to check the excesses of the ruling party or provide alternative policies to the ruling party. It's not that every day whatever Museveni thinks is right is always right. We have seen his mistakes. The NADS, how he does NADS, it was all messed up. operation wealth creation was all messed up. But if you challenge that, he will say you are against development. But where is his development? So who is right? Can't Ugandans also have ideas? Is Museveni always right? And even to make it worse, it's about Museveni, not even NRM party. So Museveni thinks he's like, is the like, I mean, the Almighty God who has always the right vision for Uganda, and everybody else is wrong. Until when he's wrong, he comes.
Miriam, has the opposition given him an alternative? Honestly,
They have manifestos.
They do not have alternatives.
Those are alternative policies. A manifesto is a platform with alternative policies put forward by opposition parties, different parties. NRM has a manifesto, FDC has a manifesto, ANT has a manifesto. All those are alternative ideas. If Museveni wants to look for development, he shouldn't be looking for people. He can go to those manifestos and say, FDC, we like your idea about, like for instance, the TDA had an idea about the sub-county, which NRM adulterated and made into a parish model. So ideally, they would have come and say, we like your idea in the manifesto about the sub-counties, but we can reform this and moderate and maybe put it at the parish level and take it. So right now, NRM is parading it as if it's NRM policy, but it was put forward by Amama Mbabazi and his party before. So we all know that. So those are, that's one example, but I can go on and on. There is abolition of graduated tax, which was put forward by Besis and FDC, and Museveni picked it and paraded it as its own. But there are so many things which NRM is doing in a wrong way, like the way they rewarded science teachers against the art teachers in a really, really disorganized way, and they messed up the school system that teachers had to strike. So if you come and say, oh, come on, this is not right the way you are doing it, Museveni will come up and say, and you are against development. But is it true? And to make matters worse, we are talking about Museveni, not NRM party. I wish we had betting parties here. So it's Museveni as an individual, Museveni as a dictator, trying to where all of that.
If I could remind you that whichever opposition political party or individual comes forward, their fight is personal. Yeah, it is directed at the person of the president and not the NRM party in general. They're alternative.
Why do you say so?
This is what has been happening. We have seen in the campaigns, everyone is saying Museveni this, Museveni that.
Because he's the one, like I said, he's the one, I mean, a dictator. That's what he is. It's not an NRM party. Actually, Museveni usurped the power of the party. He is running it as his personal property. So there is no way going to avoid him.
Right. Professor, do you want to say something?
Yes,
Please.
You are talking about opposition and you are trying to pin down Miriam. It's like I am not on the show.
Please come to her rescue.
I was a founding deputy president of the Forum for Democratic Change.
Right.
When we moved to form the FDC as a party, we left our parties. The Rosindanas left NRM, we left DP, others left UPC, and we formed the Forum for Democratic Change with the slogan, One Uganda, One People. And the basis of that slogan was what we were seeing happening, where the excesses of the regime in power was creating a very fratricidal situation within the country. That has not changed. In fact, now I can't even be shy to say that even in DP, what did Mao represent? Because basically represents the common interests of the youth of Uganda, maybe, but more importantly, the interest of Uganda. And because of the nature of our politics and the level of sectarianism that has gone into doing things in our country. We're just going back to the basics. The Kenyan politics is even very tribal. Maybe we should start negotiating as tribes, because Uganda is composed of tribes. Then we will be talking real things. Otherwise, in this pretense of parties, what do you achieve? Me and Allimadi, we are Acholis. The country, and I don't know how many of you in the US know that the largest oil deposits are actually in Acholi, and there's no single oil infrastructure in Acholi. Now, which party would help me to negotiate on behalf of my people? It becomes increasingly difficult to pretend that parties are useful to Uganda when the parties are not based on clear ideological foundations, when the regime in power is not acting in an exemplary manner that would force us. If it was pursuing policies that you feel you can only overcome by making yours better, it would be that. Otherwise, base criticism becomes the ultimate instrument of response. And it is very unfortunate where we have gone. I mean, I'll be 70 in November. I saw Uganda of the 60s. It is so pathetic that we are now in Uganda, a country which is so well endowed by God, that people are dying of starvation, that cattle are dying because there's no water. And where is the policy to address that? The education system that made some of us come. I come from Kalongo in the village. I went to Sasamulbeke, and I went to Makerere. How many can come from Kalongo now and go to Makerere? How many can come from the villages in other parts of Uganda and go to be what we have been in life? This is the fundamental question. And the framework, politics is a framework for doing these things. The current framework in Uganda is wrong. It will not work. Whether Mao joins Museveni, whether Latigo joins Museveni, whether Otafire leaves Museveni, it will not work. And that is why a national dialogue where we put everything on the table. We accept the mistakes we have made. We apologize to one another. We chart a new course, and we look at what we can do collectively. Until we come to that stage, I can guarantee you, speaking on this program now, that Ugandan politics will become more and more violent because the youth are not going to watch. And in the end, our country will not be any different from DR Congo, where the UN peacekeeping forces are now under severe pressure.
Professor, do we see, is there a chance, is there a hope that we can have a national dialogue, honestly, and where we're saying, I'm sorry where I went wrong, can we now move forward as a country? I feel like we are too divisive, our politics are too divisive, that we cannot ably sit on a round table and have that conversation. Any honest leadership can bring the country together. Yeah. In fact, Ugandans are people who are probably the easiest to lead. If you do the good, correct thing, because we are believers in God, in our different ways. If you do the right thing and you say, look, Ugandans, this is what I think should be the right thing. If President Museveni got up, instead of parading Mao, he paraded a program and he says, look, I want us to sit down as a country, and I want the different parties to send representation, the different religions to send representation, the different tribes, because we are tribes. Let us stop pretending that we are Ugandans. What is Ugandan? What is the definition other than the geographical entity? If President Museveni did that today, do you not think that it would be an incredible opportunity and a new beginning for this country? And how much money does it take?
to do that.
Understood. Thank you very much, Professor. Ambassador Henry Mayega, you've heard from Miriam, you've heard from Professor Ogenga Latigo. What do you think? What is your opinion, especially on what is your reaction to what they're saying? But also, there was an interview on the leader of opposition in Parliament, Mathias Mpuga, on the appointment, especially after the agreement was signed. Mao was subsequently appointed the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, and Mathias Mpuga said that the appointment will not have any positive consequences. Mao entered an arena where Uganda People's Congress is and DP will become dysfunctional. I don't see him having an impact on institutions. The person who does things is Mr. Museveni. Mao can only do what Museveni wishes. Ambassador Henry Mayega, is this true? And I would like to pick your comments on the previous speakers.
What I'm saying is that I cannot contest Mpuga's view for a very simple reason, because that is his personal opinion. I have mine, Professor Latigo Ogenga has, Lynn you have. There are as many opinions in the country as there are those who have them about anything. So I can't really either criticize or appraise Mpuga's opinion about what Mao did. That is his choice. Because these political matters are actually things of conjuncture. I mean, you try to guess whether there will be benefits and so on and so forth. I saw an article, for instance, in one of the newspapers, because Mao comes from Acholi. Somebody, I think, tried to sound out what the opinions of people are from Acholi, and at least those who were asked questions, I'm sure Professor Latigo Ogenga was not probably approached by the same interviewer from the New Vision to give his opinion about Mao's arrangement with President Yoweri Museveni. But there are, the point which I'm trying to make here is that there are as many opinions as there are people giving them. So Mpuga's is different from mine. He says there will be no benefits, I don't know to who, by the departure of Mao and the section of the DP to the NRM. Some other person is going to say, like, actually I've said, those who were interviewed from Acholi, they said this is very good because this is son of the soil, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. In their view, it was very good. Mpuga has his because, of course, he originally came from the DP. He's now in NUP. I don't know where else he's going to go because of the nature of our political canvas. And I hope he's not one of those who are being spoken to by President Yoweri Museveni to cross, because you can't guess what tomorrow is going to bring, definitely, as far as our politics is concerned. It is so fluid, and so be it, because discussion, as I've always said, amongst nationals, especially those who are concerned about progress of our country, should continue discussion. That's what brings me to the next point, which was raised by colleagues who are in this talk show about national dialogue. Absolutely, I agree 100%. There should be national dialogue. It should continue. It is already underway. Of course, some would say probably the pace has not gathered sufficiently for us to reach a level of consensus on a number of things. But I believe that national consensus, national discussions are ongoing. There is, for instance, IPOD, as to whether it can be given 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%. That is a different matter. But those discussions are ongoing. People can suggest how else they want these discussions to be stepped up, so that we can probably at one point in time reach a consensus. After all, I am a very good student about what happens in the US, because it boasts about having the strongest democracy in the world. And I know very well that up to now they're still grappling with a lot of things, including campaign finance, which is a matter which has never been resolved in the US. It is still under consideration, and I see a lot of altercation between the Republicans and the Democrats. So it's not, these political altercations are not an exclusive matter for Uganda. it is all over the place. I mean, when you go to the UK, for instance, people disagreed on Brexit. They went into a referendum. So we can bring as many examples as possible. So national dialogue, for instance, I mean, for as far as I'm concerned, I think it's something that should continue. If others think that it should be stepped up, fine. Still, that suggestion should be put in the public domain so that we continue talking about it. Miriam was talking about kidnaps, fine. That is a name which has been given to the people who have been arrested, including those who were involved in the violence before the elections of last year. And how else did you want the security forces to handle them? After all that they did, including torching roads and beating up women clad in yellow. And therefore, when they are picked up, that is kidnap. Should the security forces have kept quiet? Again, I go back to the US, because when people go and cross the red lines of the law, they're definitely arrested. There are those, for instance, they could be foreigners to the US, of course, who have been incarcerated, who were incarcerated at the Guantanamo Bay as a result of crossing the red lines of the law. Probably somebody in the US can call those kidnaps and so on. So the point which I'm trying to make here is that, look, even if we disagree politically, we don't need to go overboard and break the law. We can still have room for discussion, which was actually absent in the 1970s during Idi Amin's time. It wasn't there. Of course, some people don't want us to remind ourselves about what used to happen in the 1970s, but these are matters, these are things through which the country has actually gone, and we must accept them, but also work towards an improvement in as far as our politics in the country is concerned. I have absolutely no reason as to why I should be opposed to us having more discussions. National dialogue, fine, that is okay with me. The iPod is one of them, Parliament is another. We can create even more structures for this kind of discussions so that people begin to feel nationalistic. Professor Latigo Ogenga was talking about the tribes that we have in the country, quite a number of them, so many. And the other day, when the constitution was written, the numbers were stepped up. And of recent, there are others who have been added from all sorts of places in the country. So, I mean, these discussions, and as far as I'm concerned, just like in Kenya, how they are doing their politics. And Kenya, for a very strong reason, I think, have avoided political instability as a result of the only instability they've had before, I think, was in the early 1980s, when there was an attempted coup. And Uganda has suffered, should I say, 2 coups and 1 takeover in 79, and one the coup of 1971, and the other in 1985, and then the 2 takeovers actually. I think 86, 1 takeover and 2 coups. But the Kenyans have avoided those kinds of situations because they have coalesced along regions, along tribes. So if Ugandans feel that is the only way, or one of the ways how we can achieve political stability in the country and reach a political consensus, I have absolutely no reason to oppose it. Otherwise, I think it is extremely important for us to make a point that discussions are extremely important as far as our politics is concerned. Of course, Miriam always treasures referring to President Yoweri Museveni as a dictator, fine, which is okay. Others will refer to my president differently, but that is our choice, which is still okay, because each one of us has got their own perceptions of what Museveni is. And that way, rather than picking up arms to fight each other, I think these discussions, including the one we are having now, is perfectly okay as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ambassador, for that. Okay. And now, still on the issue of national dialogue, Milton, you've had from Professor Ogenga Latigo, you've had from Ambassador Henry Mayega on the issue of national dialogue. Question is, can Norbert Mao, has he opened that path for national dialogue at an open front, really? And 2, will his new appointment breathe fresh air into a constitution that the opposition has bitterly contested for 4 election cycles? Or will it, like the ones before him, be another wipeout of an established party?
I think we should start talking and thinking beyond Mao. I mean, who is Mao compared to the national destiny of Uganda. So I think, and I appreciate being a part of this conversation today, because one of the participants, which is Professor Ogenga Latigo, has elevated this conversation. I've never been in a panel setting interview where one individual just says something, allows me to sit back and take my consciousness in a different direction, which is what he's accomplished in doing. This conversation about Mao, about the NRM, about whether, of course he's a dictator. He's an absolute dictator. He's been there for 36 years and not legitimately elected. But regardless of all of that, I want us to look beyond these petty issues. Do we have the capacity to elevate Uganda? I think the answer is yes. And I look at history. If South Africa could do it with the apartheid state, the apartheid structures, the absolutely powerful military establishment and industrial establishment controlled by the apartheid regime,
Isaac.
and then they realize that it was either elevating South Africa or going to the bottom. And even de Klerk, people like de Klerk had like a Damascus moment. And they made this decision to face reality in the face that apartheid was no longer sustainable. And they had serious national dialogue, not only with the ANC and Mandela, but it was a national conversation, including all the parties, with one consciousness in their mind, that this dialogue could end up with the dissolution of the apartheid regime and the party that has been maintaining it since apartheid became official in 1948. In Uganda, we have that opportunity. Can the dictator, because apartheid was a dictatorship, can the dictatorship, whether we have in Uganda today, have a de Klerk moment, have a Damascus moment, and look at Uganda straight at the face and say, rather than, as the professor said, buying time, because that's what the regime is doing, with window dressing, bring in a Mao today, bring in whomever tomorrow, in order to just keep, as Americans say, punting the ball, keep kicking it forward and say this is something we deal with in the future. That is not what we're interested. We're interested in going beyond, knowing that we have talented Ugandans, knowing that the country is endowed with all these resources, knowing that we can do better by realizing that as things are at the moment, we don't have national cohesion. But we can avoid having a DRC situation by having this authentic, genuine dialogue. And I'm not sure if Ambassador Mayega is also referring to the same type of dialogue, where one entity does not set the agenda. And we have an exclusive, broad-based dialogue, and then we take Uganda to the next level. And from now on, these are the kind of things that I'm interested in talking about as well, not these petty issues of buying time. So I want to thank Professor Latigo for elevating the conversation that we're having today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Milton. Now, there's an issue of the recent by-election in Soroti. I want us to, in the remaining minutes to capture some of our comments from that by-election, because it brings to the fore a few issues. Someone was saying in one of the recent Twitter spaces that with the recent by-election, it looks like a do-or-die affair for the NRM. And whereas it is a multi-party dispensation, kind of democracy, we realize that the NRM is always fighting tooth and nail to win every election in every constituency. And Miriam, you already hinted on this. What is wrong? What is wrong exactly? What could be wrong? Because the NRM seems to be fighting so hard, even when it already has enough numbers in parliament.
Maybe it doesn't have them. Milton hinted earlier on that opposition has been defeating NRM in the previous elections. NRM knows, Lynn, today, if you do something, even if you lie, you yourself, you know what the truth is. NRM inside itself, they know their real numbers. They know they lost support a long time ago. That's the desperation you see when they are in the field. They rig, they beat up people, they deploy whatever all means, security, everything. They are too desperate for a reason. If you are winning, you can't be that desperate. Definitely not. That defeats common sense. So they definitely know that they no longer have the support, they no longer have the legitimacy, and they have to do whatever is possible to make sure that they keep frustrating Ugandans and buying time for the regime, like Milton has put it. And to what end? When is the tipping point? As Ugandans, I also want to join my voices with Professor Latigo and Milton. I think we should be looking ahead at the future of Uganda. I mean, NRM can no longer surprise us. They can no longer do anything more magical, different than whatever they have done, except if they turn around and say, hey, we think Uganda is more important than NRM party, than Museveni being in power. And it's time to sit down and have a national dialogue and have a consensus and see how to push our country forward. Right now, we are just in a limbo. It's just Museveni or nothing, and nothing is going on politically. Can we have a transition? God forbid, if anything happens to Museveni today, what happens to Uganda? And that's something we should all care about. Are we going to be inviting UN to keep peace in Uganda? Everybody is armed. Everybody is looking at protecting their interests. Those who have accumulated money and property in the government don't want to lose it. Those who think they have power, they will fear they are going to lose it, so they will fight. So what are we going to see? A Somalia where we have warlords everywhere? What is going to happen? Who will take over power? Do you think a vice president has enough capacity to take over power today? Have we empowered our parliament to stand up and negotiate a transition? Do we see our courts stepping up and taking charge? So what happens if Museveni, and not even NRM here, because NRM doesn't even exist without Museveni. What happens if Museveni drops anything and is incapacitated to take over leadership? So as Ugandans, we should, and this involves all the players, not only opposition. We have all the civic players. Even if you are a business person, even if you are a farmer, even if you are a student, even if you are a young Ugandan and you are trying to appreciate the politics, even if you are an elderly and you are thinking about the future, where are you leaving your grandchildren, the church leaders, the religious groups, we should all be focusing on how to steer Uganda ahead beyond this political limbo. We should be talking about transition from a dictatorship to a democratic government. And how do we do that? And who is going to lead the process? Museveni himself, I mean, Milton said he can do a de Klerk moment, but I don't know, maybe he can, but can we pressure him to do so? Yes, we can. I mean, de Klerk didn't make the decision out of the blue. There was a force pushing him to really reach that decision. And it was wise of him and good for South Africa that he realized that they were headed nowhere, and it's time to stand back the tide and think about a united South Africa, a liberated South Africa. So we want to call upon the same spirit to Uganda. It's time to think about a united Uganda, a democratic Uganda, a reconciled Uganda. And Professor Latigo brought out another issue about should we mobilize around our ethnic groups. I think that's dragging us backward. we were at that point before independence, and we shouldn't go back there. I think we can look at the region. For instance, why is Karamoja starving when we call Uganda food basket? That's where we should start. Where is the money? Why have we failed to feed and to look at Karamoja for the last so many years that Uganda has existed, even during the colonial government and after independence? What can we do to make sure that people are not dying of famine in that area, in that region? What can we do, like Professor said, to improve the schools in those areas? The schools are lagging backward. We have regional imbalances in development. It's not about ethnic groups. Why do we have western part of Uganda and the central performing so much better than the eastern and the northern? Why do we have people in western Uganda, they have the milk, but we have a large number of stunted children in Uganda? You know, those are the things we should think about. We should be thinking about Uganda, and this goes to even the existing opposition party leaders. You know, the politics has been so polarized that we have come to hide ourselves in our small corners, and everybody's fighting about survival, and we have forgotten the national building process. What should we do to get out of here? And whether it needs sitting down and having like a transitional term, whether it's like 2 years in between to take us to another level, it's worth it. And we should be thinking about all those processes. Ambassador, the national dialogue process was started by civic leaders, and it was frustrated by NRM. So I call upon you as one of the NRM leaders, please. Can you be patriotic for the first time in your life as a party? Can NRM be patriotic? Can you think about Uganda beyond power? Don't
Miriam, I don't know if there's any other party that is as patriotic as NRM, according to what they say.
In theory. In practice, they are different. And before I leave, I wanted to answer the ambassador. Ambassador, USA doesn't arrest people arbitrarily like NRM government. It follows the laws. And when they imprison people, they don't kidnap them. They arrest them according to the law. And those people are taken to court and they are punished or released accordingly. They are not incarcerated for life. They are not tortured in prison like we saw Kakwenza was beaten to death almost. They are not killed. They are not shot on the street like the 56 people that were killed by NRM military on Kampala roads in 2020. So USA doesn't do all the, let's not try to justify criminality here by just comparing with the incomparable. What NRM is doing is real gross abuse of human rights. That's why most of our military leaders today are facing sanctions from international powers, and we shouldn't stop at sanctions. The NRM government has a responsibility to punish all those people who are grossly abusing the human rights of Uganda, whether they like it or not. That's their duty. And they should follow the law and release the people who are arbitrarily arrested and imprisoned, like Honorable Sewanyana and another one. Every other day they are pushing this, and we know, like I mean, it's a dictatorship, but we can try, you know, keep trying until you leave power. If you can't do it, just leave that stage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Miriam, for that. Ambassador Henry Mayega, I will ask you the same question I've asked Miriam. In the Soroti by-elections, it was a do-or-die affair. We know it is a multi-party dispensation. We understand almost 2/3 of parliament belong to the NRM. Why does the NRM always feel the need to have almost no opposition around them? And also, does this not actually put their legitimacy and trust in question?
Yeah, because I think there was a problem with the network. Can you come again with the question?
I was saying that I've asked Miriam this same question, and I was saying that in the recent Soroti city by-election, East by-election, it was a do-or-die affair for the NRM. We understand the NRM party in parliament is about 2/3 of it. And why does the NRM always feel the need to have almost no opposition in everything they do? Does this not rid them of the legitimacy and trust?
No, not at all, because those who have been in politics for a long time know that it's all about a game of numbers. The more numbers you add, the better for you, because when it comes to passing a piece of legislation, it's again numbers that count. And to get into government, it's still numbers that count. If you want to increase your political strength on the political canvas, it's again numbers that count. In other words,
Ambassador, it already has enough numbers in parliament. Must it be a do-or-die affair? Or are we missing something?
Politics is not played that way, because every other time there has to be a contestation. You're not going to say, the only time when I've seen something happen where the ruling party has left a constituency to members of the opposition was in the UK a couple of years ago, I think about 3 years ago, when a member of parliament that belonged to the Labour Party was stabbed to death. And then the Conservatives said that in the by-elections, we are not going to field any candidate in that constituency for the very first time in the political history. I mean, in the politics, or should I call it political history of the UK, as far as I know, when that thing was left. But otherwise, whether we like it or not, even if it's the NRM which is in power, when it comes to fielding candidates, either for president or members of parliament or local councils, you are going to field candidates all over the place, because it's all about numbers. It's all about doing a roll call to renew your connections with the supporters in that very constituency, and so on and so forth. So it's all about a game of numbers. So the more numbers you have, the better for you, because when it comes to passing pieces of legislation, or actually any transitory political arrangement, numbers still count. For instance, you know very well that the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda says that should you want to change anything on the political canvas again, maybe you want to change the presidential term limits and so on and so forth, you can either use parliament or you can use the district councils. So at any one point in time, when it comes to either elections or by-elections, a political party that is serious must, as a matter of fact, field candidates all over the place. I am sure even if there are 10 more by-elections in Uganda, there will be, the NRM is going to field candidates all over the place, and so on and so forth. So, and I just wanted to respond quickly to what Miriam raised, because she was talking about that the Americans only are away contradicting ourselves. Because although we can't talk about the merits and demerits of the case, these people are actually before court. So it's, of course, the law says in Uganda that somebody is considered innocent, legally culpable. So, I mean, the two are actually before competent courts of law. So we cannot contest that one as far as I'm concerned. I think these people were arrested and then they have been arraigned before the courts of law. But I also wanted to respond to something, because she said in the US, people are arrested and paraded before courts of law, and they're never tortured and so on and so forth. And she reminded me about the stories in Guantanamo, where people were actually being subjected to waterboarding. So if waterboarding is not a matter of human rights, then probably Miriam, you know, I've been a very good student of the American politics, and I know where they have gone wrong and where they are doing things right. And you remember at the beginning of this conversation, I pointed out that, of course, and I want to say it again, that the Americans are actually not angels, but the last 250 years, they still have issues with their political system. And that doesn't, in my view, suggest the Americans can't make any political mistakes. They're making, in fact, very many, but probably that discussion can be for a totally different time when we should have this kind of engagement we're having this afternoon. Now, I just want to quickly, Miriam got to what again was raised, suggested that what happens when, for instance, Museveni, God forbid, goes. I mean, the constitution is very clear. And that also reminds me about what happened in Kenya in 1979 when Kenyatta died. because some sections of the political class in that country tried to circumvent the constitution by suggesting that Moi, who was vice president then, shouldn't become or take over the presidency. And I remember at that time, Moi comes from the Kalenjin, and Charles Njonjo, who was Attorney General at that time, comes from the Kikuyu. He resisted any deviation from the constitutional provision, and therefore, when Kenyatta died, Charles Njonjo ensured that Daniel Arap Toroitich Moi became the president of Kenya after Kenyatta died. And therefore, if God forbid anything happened to President Yoweri Museveni, I mean, the constitution is very clear. And fortunately, we have an elite army, which is totally different from what we have as the Uganda army that was left to us. I mean, the British colonists bequeathed to us the Uganda army. We resulted into a number of coups, if you want, and so on and so forth. During the 1970s, what we went through was definitely terrible. So we have an elite army, and I'm cocksure that if anything happened to the current president, the vice president would take over, and this elite army would make sure that there is no deviation in as far as that constitutional provision is concerned. So I mean, these things are really something of interest to all of us. And as I said before, these discussions are part of the dialogue that we're trying to encourage in our country, so that at the end of the day, there is consensus. Extremely important in as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that. Professor Ogenga Latigo, if you're still with us, let me see, you might have dropped off with oh yeah, we missed you on that. But Milton, I wanted to ask.
I'm there.
Oh, here you are. Oh, sorry, I thought I'd missed seeing you here. All right, Professor, we're trying to understand why by-elections. First of all, let's take a look at what happened in Omoro recently. For when the by-election happened, we saw it was a do-or-die affair for the NRM. So was in the Soroti by-election. And we're trying to understand, is this not losing a legitimacy and trust? That is one. Two, what advice to the opposition parties, especially and figures especially, that keep participating in these elections when they know that even if they did whatever they did, they would still fail at it?
Well, I would like to talk about Soroti and Arua by-election, where Bobby Wine's driver got killed. All those are symptoms of the problem I was talking about. That to have political contestation based on political parties in Uganda is meaningless. That is why even in our discussions this afternoon and in the general talk that you hear, it is opposition. If you are not in NRM, you're opposition. That is the mindset, the tragic mindset of Ugandan politics, and that is what we have to fundamentally deal with. The symptoms keep coming, but the medics that are supposed to provide. Am I there?
We can hear you.
Yeah, the medics, even when they see the symptoms, they don't have the courage to say this is the medicine that somebody must get. By the way, in the Soroti by-election, if social media is anything to go by, there was a clash between Mike Mukula and the vice president, and actually, there are even stories about the vice president being labeled as opposition supporter because she wanted the elections to go on in a rational way. I mean, breaking the house of an honorable member of parliament, arresting people in Soroti and taking them to another district in Dokolo. I mean, and when we call this politics, and we still think nothing is wrong. I personally feel too sad because maybe I should have, like many Ugandans who are in the diaspora, I should not have wasted my time in Uganda and gone and lived my life outside, because it is too painful. When you do the right thing, you are the wrong person. When you do the wrong thing, you are the right person. I mean, the members of parliament who were arrested, the matter was in court, and the witnesses made it clear in court that they were beaten and coerced to implicate these people. They even breached the normal procedure where the prosecution ought to have shared the evidences and the records of the matter with the defense lawyers. And that is where things are dragging. I mean, dear Ugandans, let us stop this thing about party. The problem is the country. The country is bleeding. And if we go on like this, the country will die in our hands. I at least I still feel that I will be held accountable if Uganda breaks up when I'm still able to say something. And that is why I choose to speak. If it were not that way, I would have just decided, let me sit and do my things. But this is our country. We don't have any other country. And a country which is so blessed. If only we could realize that nobody hates. Why would I hate Ambassador Mayega? No, Ugandans don't hate each other, but we are forced to look at each other as enemies. We are forced to do things that are wrong in order to survive. We are forced to destroy our country. And now we're in league with DR Congo. We're in league with South Sudan. We're in league with Somalia. Kenya, Tanzania have left us. Rwanda is leaving us. In spite of their inherent problems, at least managing the affairs of the country honestly, if you go there, you can see. I mean, this is a minimum. It doesn't require anything. It just requires an open heart. It requires accepting that we are all human beings. We're vulnerable to mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we can be forgiven when we say, I'm sorry, this was wrong. Rather than insisting that the wrong is right because it is me who did it.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor. Very, very passionate appeal there. Milton, I want us to, you keep hinting at Museveni being a dictator. Now, I want us to look at a possibility of a post-Museveni, because the political commentators were saying that with the current moves in the NRM, they're trying to, reduce the number of serious challenges that probably the president has to worry about, or the NRM itself has to worry about. But also, some people have said, even Mao himself has said that DP will work with NRM to create a Uganda post-Museveni. Can we expect a Uganda post-Museveni peaceful, and how can we prepare for it?
We need to have a declock moment, as I said earlier. I encourage Ambassador to have a personal declock moment himself as well, and encourage as many of his colleagues as possible to have a declock moment so that we can indeed look at the issue that we face head on and deal with it and stop pretending, so that the ambassador would not have the burden of having to defend the indefensible situation that we have in Uganda. We all want a better Uganda that is inclusive. And Professor Ogenga Latigo has made a very passionate, powerful argument for that. And that is why, in terms of making individual response to the by-elections, there's no need for that. He's looking beyond those kind of issues. He's looking beyond buying time for the system. And I hope there are enough people within the system that can have a reality check and say, we have to start thinking of Uganda beyond the NRM, Uganda beyond Museveni, and what are the things that we need to do to create that Uganda. And I hope that will be the topic of a future conversation that we have here. And I think we should not look at Europe or the United States as the barometer. We cannot say because, these people do this and that, therefore, we are not doing that badly off. That should not be the barometer that we look for. That is another dangerous type of European worshiping that I totally discourage, and reject. At the end of the day, we know we have the capacity to create a better Uganda. Are we willing, as the professor said, to say that, yes, we made mistakes. Yes, we're willing to apologize. It's not because I made the mistake, it should be excused. No, let's have a reality check and have that national conversation. Remember, many years ago, Mali tried it, and I think it was successful for a while. And then, of course, they retrenched. The military became involved once again. But if I recall, that was a very broad-based conversation. Nobody was dictating the agenda, and that is what we need to have in Uganda. And I remain hopeful that we can actually have that in Uganda.
All right. Now, as we wind up this interesting conversation, Miriam, what does then, with all this conversation we've had, with all the opinions we've had, and which are really welcome to, from everybody, what does the political future then look like for this country? Because we are all scared of discussing the post-Museveni era because we don't know how it's going to look. We don't know how anyone is prepared for it. But right now, 2026 is, close by. And somebody was actually asking that, could we see Mao as the, president come 2026 or 2031? I mean, what can we as a country now hope for or look out for?
As a country, I think, like we discussed earlier, we should stop looking at individuals because people are just a small component, whether it's Museveni or Mao. They are just as ordinary and as temporary as all of us. So we should aim bigger. We should look at a nation. We should look at building institutions instead. The institutions, if they choose a leader, that's the good one. That's the one we go with. And that leader should work with others and operate within those institutions, steer Uganda forward. So we should look at the long term, the bigger picture. Institutions outlive individuals. Institutions ensure stability, continuity, predictability, and transparency more than individuals. Individuals are corruptible. Individuals have weaknesses. So I don't want to look at Mao. Maybe Mao won't be there. Maybe another big, great leader is going to emerge, and Ugandans are going to choose otherwise. So, let's put a process in place. Let's build the structures, and those structures will through those structures, a good leader or a leader who's chosen by the majority of Ugandans will emerge and will push Uganda forward, and he will retire and another one will come on, like that. And I want to appreciate what Milton has said, that we should stop looking at the West as a standard measure for democracy, because Ugandans, African countries are unique in a different way compared to the West. Our social structures and our political history is different. So we should build systems which really accommodate our interests and accommodate our ideas, beliefs, and aspirations, which are totally different from the Western. We might copy here and there, but we should pick the good and use it to strengthen our own beliefs, which are already on the ground. And on that note, I want to push us, to direct us to our recent past. Uganda has ever had a national dialogue in form of the constitutional making process. It might have been labeled a constitutional making process, but it was in practice a national dialogue. It was a moment for all of us to be consulted on the future of Uganda, the Uganda we want to see. And people had a platform to share their ideas. They had opportunities to talk and have discussions. And before really we wonder how a national dialogue can be done, we can borrow from that process. But the challenge is, if we have to put up another process, it shouldn't be dominated by the ruling party. It should be a process built on consensus. It should come from within the people, and it should be a result of all people's participation and ideas and choices. And that's how we come up with a binding resolution which everybody believes in. And as far as East African community is concerned, I mean, I wouldn't wish to see Uganda, going through the process of DRC or Sudan, and that's where we are headed, unfortunately. We should, all of us, think back. Ambassador Mayega, you are in NRM, but I'm not sure you want your child to live in Uganda, which looks like South Sudan. And that's where we are headed. NRM believes in guns, NRM believes in money, NRM believes in power compared to people's choices. And that's what happened in Soroti. Are we still looking at elections as a way to make people choose their leaders, or we are looking at elections as a way to suppress people's choices? So why do we have elections if we can't guarantee fairness and transparency, if we can't give people an opportunity to choose the leaders they want? What is the purpose of having that election, really? And that's what we should be thinking about. And going forward, before we have an independent electoral commission, not in a name, but in representation, like the Kenyan Electoral Commission is. It's not the best, but it's better than what we have today, a rubber stamping institution for NRM party. That's what our EC is, and that's so absurd. If we are to build democracy, if we are to have leaders which are chosen by the people, we need an independent arbitration body. NRM can't vote on itself and then decide on itself. It's like NRM versus everybody else, and they want, whatever they want is what works, and what they don't want is the enemy of progress, and it shouldn't work. I think that's where we erred, and I don't know if we can still turn the tide. How do we do that? Milton is talking about the de Klerk moment, but Milton, you haven't given us a way. How do we build civic awareness? How do we inform all Ugandans that we really need that moment today? Please. Thank you.
Well, our version of de Klerk has to be willing to accept that proposal. And if he does accept that proposal, then all the political parties, all the civil society organizations, all the known official human rights activist organizations. We have intellectuals who may not be part of political parties that can contribute. You gave a very good example that even though it was a constitution-making process, it was actually sort of a national dialogue. And I'm sure if there's no resistance, we can easily do that once again in Uganda. But the ones who control the establishment, the police and military structure, have to be willing to live with the consequences of that dialogue, because obviously the end result would mean yielding absolute power. And to me, that seems to be the stumbling block.
All right, Milton, please go ahead and give us your closing remark.
I think those would be my closing remarks. I would like to cede my minute to to Professor Ogenga Latigo.
All right, Professor, you're up for it.
Thank you. Am I on air?
Yes,
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah, you asked that we fear talking about the post-Museveni situation.
Mhm.
In 2014, when the NRM delegates conference was called to remove Amama Mbabazi from Secretary General, I stayed in Mutungu, and as I was coming from town, I saw buses and people seemingly excited going to Nambole. I came home, I couldn't sleep. And in the end, I went to my study and wrote an article, Political Succession, Why Can't We Learn from Trees? I'm an ecologist. It is a very passionate analysis of politics and a very dispassionate use of trees, forest, tropical forest, Scandinavian forest, and the lone acacia tree, which is the African strongman. I would urge Ugandans to go back and read that article. It informs the kind of situation that we are in. It will help us to pinpoint the things that we must deal with. Because if we don't do that, I dread the hand, because, and to be honest with you, I pray to God every day that Uganda should not fall into the situation that we have seen elsewhere. So I thank you all for Miriam, who contacted me, and my colleagues Ugandans for the opportunity to share this. But let us do everything to bring ourselves as Ugandans together, because our country is so beautiful, and there's such a big future that if we work together without division, we could achieve things that nobody even imagined was possible.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Honorable, I beg your pardon, Ambassador Henry Mayega, your concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I just want to say that the ballot in 2026 is going to see Lukwago areas as a presidential candidate. So that one shouldn't come as a surprise. Because I heard you suggest Mao in the NRM file. That is okay if he goes through the structures of the NRM as a presidential candidate. He will be welcome. Somebody referred to the issue which I raised a little earlier about us not looking at Europe in as far as democratic practices are concerned in our country, but as far as I remember, and history has it, that it is Europe which came to us in Africa and told us to be democratic, and that there are set precepts of democratic practices that we should follow. So at this particular time, if we are saying we are deviating from that, I don't think I have any problem with that, so that we make our democracy the way the Chinese, where I lived for 5 years, do their democracy. They call it democracy with Chinese characteristics. And then the Americans contest that is not democracy. Even last evening, I had some people in the Senate and also in the Congress of the US referring to China as a dictatorship, given the fact that the Speaker of Parliament, Nancy Pelosi, is visiting, and I understand she's already in flight to Asia. I hope she reaches Taiwan. And then somebody referred to Michael Mukula and the Vice President. I don't want to believe that in any political party there shouldn't be actually contradictions. They're always there. And therefore, you'll find people having totally different opinions on something. And as far as I know, the NRM is actually mild ideological. There are, for instance, people who believe in the multipartyism in the NRM. There are those who believe in the one-party system. There are also monarchists within the NRM, those who support monarchists or monarchical arrangements in the country and so on. So multi-ideological, multi-dimensional, and as far as the NRM is concerned. So, but of course, conclusively, I just want to say that in as far as I'm concerned, these discussions we're having are important. And I believe they are going to inform our subsequent actions as a country. And I agree that national dialogue is a must. How we shape it is a totally different matter, because we'll have as many opinions about it as we are in the country, and as there are people with those opinions. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Miriam and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. We'll catch you again, I think, next time when we call upon you, because as you say, it is important for national development for us to have continued conversations on this. So I thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely weekend.